The call came at 7:12 a.m., just as I was pouring coffee I didn't even want. A man introduced himself as a federal agent and asked why my name was tied to an offshore account I'd never heard of. Why would my ex-husband Lucas Bennett move money under my identity, and how did my signature end up authorizing transfers I never made? He emailed me a document while we were still on the phone. My name was there. My signature was there. The money was gone. "Ms. Flores," he said quietly, "did you ever approve a foreign transfer to a holding company in the Cayman Islands?" I stared at the screen, and for the first time in 2 years, I realized my divorce hadn't ended anything. "If you're listening, tell me where you're from and what time it is there. I read every comment, and if you've ever had someone twist the truth against you, stay with me and consider subscribing." Looking back, the divorce felt less like a decision and more like something that happened to me while I was too exhausted to fight it. 2 years ago, Lucas and I sat across from each other in a glass-walled conference room in downtown Los Angeles. Everything about that room felt controlled neutral colors, filtered light, no sharp edges. It was designed to keep things calm, or maybe to keep people quiet. Lucas had already positioned himself as the reasonable one. Calm voice, steady posture, the kind of man who made everyone else in the room subtly align with him without realizing it. "We can do this quickly," he said that morning, sliding a stack of papers toward me. No court, no headlines. We both walk away clean. Clean. That was the word he kept using. I remember glancing at my attorney, Nina Alvarez. She didn't look convinced, but she also didn't push back as hard as I expected. Later, I would realize why Lucas had already framed everything as settled. The numbers, the assets, the debts. It was all presented like a finished equation. At that time, I didn't have the energy to question it. The months leading up to the divorce had been disorienting. Lucas controlled our finances completely. That had always been our arrangement. He handled investments. I focused on my career in healthcare administration. It seemed efficient, trusting even, until it wasn't. When things started falling apart between us, I noticed how quickly access disappeared. Passwords changed, accounts under review, explanations that sounded technical enough to shut down further questions. "There's some restructuring happening," he told me once when I asked about a missing transfer. "You wouldn't understand the details." And I believed him, not because I was naive, but because at the time I didn't have proof that I shouldn't. By the time we were sitting in that conference room, I already felt like I was standing outside my own life looking in. Greg Whitman. Lucas's attorney spoke in a measured tone, walking us through the documents. He summarized entire pages in a few sentences, highlighting what he called the essential points. "Asset distribution is straightforward," he said. "Certain liquidated assets have already been allocated toward outstanding obligations." I remember that phrase clearly now. Liquidated assets. At the time, it just sounded like something had been handled, taken care of. Outstanding obligations. I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. Lucas leaned forward slightly, giving me a look that felt both reassuring and dismissive. "Business-related," he said. "Some investments didn't perform as expected. I covered it." Covered it. As if that explained everything. Nina glanced at me, then back at the documents. "Aurora, we can request a detailed breakdown if you want to review." Lucas cut in gently, almost apologetically. "We've already gone through all of this, Nina. I don't think dragging it out helps anyone." Dragging it out. Another phrase designed to make hesitation feel like a problem. I remember the weight of the pen in my hand, how it felt heavier than it should have. There were so many pages. Initial here, sign there, date at the bottom. At one point, I paused on a section filled with dense financial language. "What does this part mean?" I asked. Greg answered before Nina could. "It just confirms that certain assets have been converted and distributed prior to finalization." Standard language. Standard. I nodded even though I didn't fully understand it. Because in that moment, understanding felt less important than finishing. Ending the tension. Getting out of that room. Lucas softened his voice when he saw me hesitate again. "You don't have to worry about any of this anymore," he said. "I've handled it." That sentence stayed with me long after the papers were signed. At the time, it sounded like relief. Now, sitting in my apartment with a federal agent's email open on my screen, it sounded like something else entirely. I stood up and walked to my desk, pulling out the old storage box where I kept everything from that time documents I hadn't touched in 2 years. It felt strange opening it, like stepping back into a version of myself I barely recognized. Inside were copies of the divorce papers neatly stacked, emails printed out, notes I had scribbled in the margins of things I never fully followed up on. I started going through them slowly this time, not rushing, not skimming, page by page, line by line. And then I saw it again. That same phrase, liquidated assets. But this time I didn't move past it. I read the entire section carefully, every sentence, every clause. It didn't explain where the money went. It only confirmed that it had already been moved before the agreement was finalized and that I acknowledged it. Acknowledged. My chest tightened. I flipped to the back pages looking for anything that might give context. Supporting documents. Attachments. Something. That's when I noticed a reference number tied to an external file. I didn't remember ever seeing that file before. I went back to my laptop searching through my old email archive. It took a few minutes, but eventually I found it an email from Lucas sent late at night just 3 days before we signed everything. No subject line, just an attachment. I must have seen it back then. Or maybe I hadn't. I honestly couldn't remember. My cursor hovered over the file for a moment. Then I clicked. The file didn't open right away. For a second, I thought it was corrupted, or maybe just too large. My laptop hesitated, the screen flickering before the document finally loaded. A spreadsheet. Rows and rows of numbers, dates, account codes. At first glance, it didn't look like anything meaningful. Just another financial document. The kind Lucas used to scroll through effortlessly while I stood behind him pretending I understood more than I did. But this time, I wasn't rushing. I leaned closer, scanning the first column. Dates. They lined up almost perfectly with the final 3 weeks of our marriage. The period right before everything officially ended. That wasn't a coincidence. "Maya," I said, grabbing my phone. "Are you busy?" She answered on the second ring. "Depends. What's wrong?" I didn't bother easing into it. I think Lucas moved money before the divorce. A lot of it. And somehow my name is on it. There was a pause. Not silence. Just that brief shift when someone realizes this isn't a casual conversation anymore. "Send it to me," she said. "Right now." I forwarded the file and waited, my eyes drifting back to the screen. The numbers were large. Not just savings level large, structured level large. Transfers broken into smaller amounts, routed through different accounts, then consolidated again. It looked deliberate, organized, calculated. Maya called back within minutes. "Okay," she said, her tone sharper now. "This isn't random. These are staged transfers. Staged layered," she corrected. "It's a way to move money without making it obvious. You split it, move it across multiple accounts, sometimes across borders, then bring it back together somewhere else. I swallowed. You mean yes, she said quietly. Like laundering. The words settled in my chest like something heavy and cold. I didn't know about any of this, I said more to myself than to her. I know, Maya replied, but that's not the problem right now. I closed my eyes for a moment. What is... The problem is that your name is on at least one of these authorizations. I opened my eyes again, staring at the line she was referring to. There it was, Aurora Flores. Next to it, a digital signature timestamp. I leaned back slowly, my fingers going numb. I never signed this. I believe you, Maya said, but the system doesn't care what you remember. It cares what it can verify. I forced myself to breathe, to think. Check the timestamps, I said. Look at the exact date and time. There was a pause as she scrolled. Aurora. What? The signature was logged at 2:14 a.m. I frowned. That doesn't mean anything. I could have been awake. No, she said carefully. Look at the date. I did, and everything in my body went still. That was the night I was in the hospital. I didn't remember much from that evening, just fragments. Fluorescent lights, a nurse asking questions, Lucas standing near the door speaking for me more than I spoke for myself. Exhaustion had pushed me past the point of clarity. I had barely been able to hold my phone, let alone authorize international financial transfers. Maya, my voice came out quieter than I expected. I couldn't have signed anything that night, I know, she said. Which means either someone had access to your credentials, or they created something that looks like my signature, I finished. Neither option made this smaller. If anything, it made it worse. I pulled the laptop closer again, scanning the surrounding entries. The transaction tied to my name wasn't isolated. It was part of a sequence funds moving from a domestic account to an entity labeled as a holding company. No clear business name, just an abbreviated code. Do you see the destination, I asked? Yeah, Maya said. It's registered offshore. Cayman Islands. Of course it was. I let out a slow breath, trying to keep my thoughts from spiraling. This lines up with what the agent said this morning, I murmured. Foreign holding company? Maya didn't respond immediately. When she did, her voice had shifted again, quieter, more cautious. There's something else, she said. What? This isn't just one transaction with your name on it. My stomach dropped. What do you mean I'm seeing multiple entries where your credentials were used to authorize movement between accounts? Smaller amounts, spread out over several days. I stared at the screen, scrolling down faster now. She was right. It wasn't just one line. It was a pattern, carefully spaced, strategically timed, as if someone had taken my identity and used it in controlled doses, just enough to build legitimacy without drawing attention. I would remember this, I said, my voice tightening. I would remember signing something like this. Unless you never saw it, Maya replied. The room felt smaller all of a sudden. I thought about the weeks before the divorce, the passwords that stopped working, the times Lucas insisted on handling things because I was too overwhelmed, the way he had access to everything, email, documents, even my phone sometimes when mine was charging and his was closer. A slow, uncomfortable realization began to form. This wasn't just about moving money, I said quietly. No, Maya agreed. It was about making it look like you moved it. I pressed my fingers against my temple, trying to steady myself. If that's true, I began. Then if anyone ever looked into it, Maya finished, you'd be the one explaining those signatures. And suddenly the call from Agent Cole made perfect sense. I wasn't just a witness. I was part of the record. My laptop chimed softly. A new email. From the same federal address. Subject line, follow-up documentation. I opened it immediately. Inside was a short message. Aurora, we've identified the entity receiving the funds. Please review the attached ownership records. There was a single file attached. I hesitated for only a second before clicking it open. The document loaded faster this time. Corporate registration details. Director names. Filing history. My eyes moved down the page until they landed on the line that mattered. Registered Director Ryan Bennett, Lucas's older brother. I felt something shift inside me, not panic this time, but clarity. This wasn't an isolated decision. It was a system, a family system, and I had been written into it without ever knowing. Maya, I said slowly, this wasn't just Lucas. I was just about to say that she replied. I stared at the screen, my reflection faintly visible against the white background of the document. 2 years ago, I thought I had walked away from a marriage that simply didn't work. Now I was looking at something much more deliberate, much more structured, and far more dangerous than I had ever imagined. The next morning, I sat across from Evan Turner in a quiet office that smelled faintly of paper and coffee. Not the polished kind you get in corporate spaces, this was something more grounded. Real. I needed that. Evan didn't interrupt while I explained everything. The call from Agent Cole, the spreadsheet, the signatures, Ryan Bennett's name. He just listened, occasionally jotting something down, his expression steady in a way that made me feel like I wasn't overreacting. When I finished, he leaned back slightly. Let's start with what we can prove, he said. Not what we felt, not what we suspected, what we could prove. I handed him my laptop. He scrolled through the spreadsheet first, then opened the document with my digital signature. Do you remember signing anything electronically around this time? He asked. No, I said. And especially not that night. I was in the hospital. He glanced up. You're certain, yes. That word came out faster than anything else I'd said that morning. Evan nodded once, then clicked into the file's properties. This part matters, he said, turning the screen slightly so I could see. Digital documents carry metadata, basically a record of when and how they were created, modified, and signed. I leaned closer, trying to follow. He pointed to a timestamp. This shows when the signature was applied. 2:14 a.m., same as Maya had said. Then he scrolled further. And this shows the device used to authorize it. A device ID, not something I immediately recognized. Can that be traced? I asked. Sometimes, he said, but what's more important is this. He highlighted another field. IP address. Every time a document is signed electronically, it usually logs the network it came from, he explained. If we can match this to a location, we can start building a timeline. My chest tightened. And if it doesn't match me, then we have a problem, he said calmly. Just not the kind you're worried about. He didn't say it dramatically. He didn't need to. I watched as he cross-referenced the timestamp with the IP log. Then he opened another window, pulling up a database I didn't recognize. A few seconds passed. Then he stopped scrolling. This IP address, he said slowly, was registered to a private network used by Bennett Holdings. My stomach dropped. That was Lucas's company. I felt the room tilt slightly, not physically, but in that subtle way reality shifts when something clicks into place. So the signature, I began. Didn't come from your home, Evan said. And it didn't come from a hospital network either. It came from Lucas, or at least from somewhere under his control. I sat back, exhaling slowly. For the first time since this started, I felt something different than panic. Direction. "This is enough, isn't it?" I asked. "To prove it wasn't me." Evan didn't answer right away. He closed the file and folded his hands. "It's a strong indicator," he said. "But in a case like this, strong isn't the same as conclusive." Of course it wasn't. There's more, I said, pulling up the other transactions Maya had pointed out. "My name appears multiple times, not just once." He reviewed them carefully, his eyes moving faster now. "They spaced these out," he murmured. "Different amounts, different dates. That's not accidental." "No," I said quietly. "It's a pattern." He nodded. "And patterns are harder to dismiss." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he looked at me again more directly this time. "Aurora, I need to ask you something, and I need you to think carefully before you answer." I felt my shoulders tense. "Okay. During the weeks leading up to your divorce, did Lucas have access to your accounts, your email, your devices?" I didn't hesitate this time. "Yes." The word came out steady, but it carried more weight than before. I thought back to all the small moments I had ignored. The times he insisted on resetting passwords for security. The nights he used my laptop because his was updating. The way notifications would disappear before I could read them. At the time, it had all felt inconvenient. Now it felt deliberate. Evan nodded slowly as if confirming something he already suspected. "That gives us a path," he said. "A path to what?" "To showing access and opportunity," he replied. "If we can demonstrate that Lucas had both, and you didn't have the capacity to authorize these transactions at the time, it shifts the burden." To him I said, "Exactly." I looked down at my hands, realizing they weren't shaking anymore. 2 years ago, I had sat in a room and signed papers I didn't fully understand because I trusted someone who had already decided what the outcome would be. Now I was sitting in a different room looking at the same situation through a completely different lens, not as something that happened to me, but as something that could be taken apart, piece by piece. "There's something else," Evan said, breaking my train of thought. I looked up. "What?" He turned the laptop back toward me and opened another document, the one Agent Cole had sent with the offshore company details. "Ryan Bennett is listed as the director," he said, "but look at the beneficiary section." I scanned the page again, slower this time. At first it just looked like more legal language, layers of ownership, nested entities. Then I saw it. A name. My name. Aurora Flores, listed as a beneficial interest holder in a fund I had never seen before. My breath caught. What does that mean, I asked, even though part of me already understood. "It means," Evan said carefully, "that on paper a portion of those funds belongs to you." I stared at the screen, the words blurring slightly. "But I don't have access to it," I said. "I didn't even know it existed." "I know," he replied, "and that's exactly why it's a problem. Because if the money was tied to me, then so was the liability." A slow, cold realization settled in. This wasn't just about hiding money, I said. "No," Evan agreed. "It was about redirecting responsibility." I leaned back in my chair, the weight of that sinking in. Lucas hadn't just moved money out of reach. He had positioned me between himself and the consequences. And if this had gone unnoticed, I might have been the one answering for all of it. Evan closed the file and looked at me again, his expression more serious now. "Aurora, if we push this forward," he said, "this stops being about your divorce. This becomes a federal investigation. I met his gaze steady for the first time since I walked in. "Then we push it forward," I said. He held my eyes for a moment as if measuring whether I understood what that meant. "All right," he said finally. "Then we do it properly." My phone buzzed on the desk between us. A message from an unknown number. I picked it up slowly, a familiar tension returning to my chest. There were only 2 words on the screen. "We need to talk." No name. But I didn't need one. I already knew who it was. I didn't answer the message right away. Instead, I stared at it for a few seconds longer than I should have, like if I gave it enough time, it might turn into something else. It didn't. "We need to talk." Lucas had always been precise with his words. Never too much, never too little. Just enough to pull me back into a conversation on his terms. Not this time. I set my phone down and looked at Evan. He just texted me. Evan didn't look surprised. That was fast. "You think he knows?" "I think people like Lucas don't wait for confirmation," he said. "They move when something feels off." That made sense. It also meant this wasn't just reactive anymore. It was active. "What do I do?" I asked. Evan didn't answer immediately. He considered it, then said, "You can meet him. But if you do, you don't confront, you observe." Observe. 2 years ago, I wouldn't have known how to do that. I would have gone in looking for answers, trying to get him to explain, to admit, to fix something that had already been decided. Now I understood something I hadn't before. Lucas didn't respond to questions. He responded to control. "I'll meet him," I said. Evan nodded once. "Public place. No documents, no accusations. And Aurora." I looked up. "Don't let him rewrite the situation while you're sitting there." I gave a small nod. I knew exactly what he meant. An hour later, I was sitting at a cafe in Santa Monica, the kind of place Lucas used to choose neutral expensive without trying to look like it, just enough privacy between tables to make conversations feel contained. I arrived early on purpose. I wanted to see him walk in. When he did, nothing about him looked different. Same posture, same controlled pace. Same expression that could pass for calm to anyone who didn't know him well. He saw me, gave a small smile, and walked over like we were meeting for something ordinary. "Aurora," he said, taking the seat across from me. "You look well." "I'm doing fine," I replied. He studied me for a moment as if recalibrating something internally. "That's good," he said. "I was starting to wonder if you were going to respond. I saw your message, and yet you didn't reply. I didn't think I needed to." A small pause. Not awkward, measured. Lucas leaned back slightly. "So, he said what's going on." There it was. Not. "What did you find?" Not. "Did someone contact you?" What's going on? Like I was the one introducing a problem into his perfectly stable system. I didn't answer right away. I let the silence sit there just long enough to be intentional. Then I said I got a call this morning. From a federal agent. Lucas didn't react immediately, but I saw it just a fraction of a second where something in his expression shifted before settling back into place. "Is that right?" he said lightly. "They asked about offshore accounts." Another pause. Lucas reached for the menu, glancing at it as if we were still deciding what to order. "There are a lot of offshore accounts in the world," he said. "That's not exactly unusual." "No," I agreed. "It's not." I watched him carefully now. Not what he said, but how he said it. Measured tone. No denial. Just redirection. "They also mentioned my name," I added. That made him look up. "Your name," he repeated. "Yes." Lucas set the menu down slowly. That doesn't make any sense. It almost sounded convincing. Almost. I thought the same thing I said. So I started looking into it. There it was again, that brief flicker. He didn't interrupt. Didn't ask what I found. He waited. Lucas always preferred to let people fill the silence themselves. I didn't. I came across some transaction records, I said. Transfers made right before the divorce. Business-related, he said immediately. I told you that at the time. You told me a lot of things, I replied. Our eyes held for a second longer than necessary. Then he smiled slightly, like he was easing us both out of tension. Aurora, you were under a lot of stress back then, he said. I handled things so you wouldn't have to. There it was. Not a denial. A repositioning. He wasn't saying it didn't happen. He was saying I didn't understand it. I noticed something else I said, keeping my voice even. Lucas tilted his head slightly. What's that A specific account? I didn't say the name. I didn't need to. I just watched him. And there it was, a pause that was too precise. Too careful. Which account, he asked. You tell me, I said. Another silence. Lucas leaned forward slightly now, his voice softer. Aurora, he said. If someone's dragging you into something, you need to be careful. You don't want to get caught up in a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? I almost laughed. But I didn't. Instead, I said, You mentioned something earlier. He frowned slightly. What do you mean when you said there are a lot of offshore accounts? He didn't respond. You said that before I mentioned anything about where the money went. The silence this time was different. He didn't fill it. He didn't redirect. He just watched me. And in that moment, I knew. He knew. I knew. Not everything, but enough. Lucas leaned back slowly, exhaling through his nose. This doesn't have to become something bigger than it is, he said. That was new. Not confusion. Not dismissal. Containment. What is it then, I asked. A situation that can be resolved quietly. There it was. The shift. The moment he stopped pretending this was nothing. How, I asked. Lucas held my gaze. We can make an adjustment, he said. There are ways to correct imbalances. Imbalances, I repeated. Yes, he said it like he was offering a solution, like this was still something he controlled. Are you offering me money, I asked. I'm offering you a way to move forward without unnecessary complications. I sat there for a second, letting that settle. 2 years ago, that sentence would have worked. It would have sounded like peace. Now it sounded like leverage. I already moved forward, I said. Lucas's expression tightened just slightly. Then why are we here? He asked. I stood up, picking up my bag. Because you asked to talk, I said. I left before he could respond. I didn't look back. By the time I got to my car, my phone was already vibrating. A new message, this time from Agent Cole. Aurora, we've confirmed the primary account holder tied to the offshore transfers. There was a second line below it. You're not going to like who it is. I didn't open the message right away. Not because I didn't want to know, but because I already had a feeling I did. I sat in my car for a moment, hands resting on the steering wheel, letting the silence settle. 2 years ago, I would have rushed to read it. Needed the answer immediately. Needed clarity, even if it hurt. Now I understood something different. Information wasn't just something you consumed, it was something you prepared for. I exhaled slowly, then unlocked my phone. Aurora, we've confirmed the primary account holder tied to the offshore transfers. You're not going to like who it is. Below the message was a file attachment. I opened it. Corporate ownership records, layered entities, names that meant nothing at first glance. But I knew what I was looking for now, not the surface, but the structure beneath it. I scrolled past the first page, then the second, and then I saw it. Primary Managing Entity Bennett Strategic Holdings, LLC, Registered Director Ryan Bennett. That part I already knew, but it wasn't the line that made my chest tighten. It was the one beneath it. Beneficial account holder, Aurora Flores. I stared at the screen, the words refusing to shift into something that made sense. Not associated with. Not authorized by. Holder. Evan was right, I murmured to myself. They didn't just move the money. They parked it under me. My phone buzzed again. Agent Cole calling. I answered immediately. I saw the file. Then you understand the situation, he said. I understand that on paper I own an account I've never accessed, and that account is tied to a series of international transfers currently under review, he added. His tone wasn't accusatory, but it wasn't reassuring either. Am I under investigation? I asked. There was a brief pause. You're part of the record, he said carefully. Right now we're determining intent. Intent. That word mattered more than anything else. Then let me be clear, I said. I didn't authorize any of this. I didn't know it existed until today. I hear you, he replied. And the data we're seeing supports that partially. Partially? What does that mean? It means there are indicators suggesting your credentials were used without your direct involvement, he said. But we still need to establish that conclusively. So what do you need from me? Everything you have, he said. Documents, emails, access history, anything that helps us build a timeline. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. You'll have it. We ended the call, and for a moment I just sat there letting the weight of it settle. This wasn't theoretical anymore. This wasn't about what Lucas might have done. This was about what could be proven. And right now, what could be proven still included me. I drove straight back to Evan's office. He was already expecting me. Agent Cole sent it over, he said as I walked in. Sit. I handed him my phone anyway, letting him open the file himself. He read it faster than I had, slower than Maya would have. When he finished, he leaned back, his expression tightening slightly. They structured this carefully, he said. I figured. No, he added, looking at me more directly. I mean, extremely carefully. This isn't just about hiding money. This is about redirecting ownership in a way that holds up under initial scrutiny, which means if this had gone unnoticed, he said, and the account was flagged later, you would have been the first person they contacted. I let that sink in. Not Lucas, I said. No, Evan replied. You. Of course, because on paper everything pointed to me. Can we prove I didn't control it? I asked. He nodded slowly. We can build that case. But it's not just about proving you didn't. It's about showing who did. I thought about the IP address, the timestamp, the hospital. Start there, I said. The signature. The night I was admitted. Evan nodded. We'll subpoena access logs, device records, anything tied to that authorization. And the company will connect the ownership chain, he said. Ryan Bennett is the visible layer. Lucas is likely behind it. But we need evidence that ties him directly to the execution, not just the structure. I crossed my arms, leaning back slightly. He slipped today. Evan raised an eyebrow. How? He mentioned offshore accounts before I told him where the money went. Evan considered that. That's useful, he said. Not proof, but useful. There's more, I added. He offered to adjust imbalances. Evan let out a quiet breath. A settlement attempt. A bribe, I said. A poorly disguised one, he agreed. For a moment the room went quiet. Then Evan leaned forward slightly. "There's something else you need to understand," he said. I looked at him. "What?" "If this moves forward, and it will, you're going to be pulled into it more directly," he said. "Interviews. Possibly testimony. Your name is already in the system." "I know," I said. "Are you prepared for that?" That question would have terrified me 2 years ago. Now it felt different. Not easy, but clear. "Yes," I said. Evan held my gaze for a second, then nodded once. "Good," he said. "Because we're not the only ones building a case." A small knot formed in my chest. "What do you mean?" He turned his laptop toward me again and pulled up a new document. "This came in about an hour ago," he said. I leaned closer. It was a financial movement report. Recent activity, not 2 years ago. Now. "They're still moving money," I said quietly. Evan nodded. "Which means they're either trying to clean up or cover something up," I finished. "Exactly." My phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. This time I didn't hesitate. I opened it. A single message. "You should have taken the offer. No name." But the tone was different this time. Not controlled. Not calculated. Sharp. Reactive. I looked up at Evan. "He knows I didn't agree," I said. Evan's expression hardened slightly. "Good," he replied. That wasn't the answer I expected. "Why is that good?" I asked. "Because it means he's starting to lose control," Evan said. I stared at the message again. For the first time since this began, I didn't feel pulled back into Lucas's orbit. I felt something else. Distance. Clarity. And just beneath that a shift in power I hadn't fully recognized until now. By the time I left Evan's office, the sun had already dropped behind the buildings, leaving the city in that dim reflective light where everything looks softer than it really is. I didn't feel soft. I felt exposed. Not in the way I had during the divorce when everything felt out of my control, but in a different way. Like I was finally seeing the full structure of something that had been built around me without my consent. And now I was standing inside it, fully aware. The next step wasn't mine to take alone anymore. It belonged to the people who knew how to read the system from the inside. Dr. Michael Harris didn't look like what I expected from a forensic accountant. No expensive suit, no polished presence. He wore a simple blazer, sleeves slightly rolled like someone who cared more about clarity than appearances. Evan introduced us quickly, then stepped back, letting Harris take over. "I've reviewed the documents you provided," Harris said, shaking my hand. "And I'll be direct, this is one of the cleaner structures I've seen." "Cleaner?" I asked. "In terms of design," he clarified. "Not intent." That made sense. He pulled up a series of charts on his laptop, turning it toward me. "What you're looking at here," he said, "is a layered transfer model. Funds move from a primary domestic account break into smaller transactions, pass through intermediary accounts, and eventually consolidate offshore." I followed the lines as best I could. Arrows connecting one entity to another, then splitting again. "It's meant to look like independent activity," he continued. "But when you overlay timing amounts and authorization points, patterns emerge. Patterns that point to Lucas," I asked. "Patterns that point to control," Harris corrected. "Lucas is a likely controller, but we need to show that, not assume it." I nodded. That distinction mattered. "Now," he said, tapping another section. "This is where your name comes in." A separate branch of the diagram lit up. Your identity is used at key authorization points, he explained. Not for the largest transfers, but for enough of them to establish a legitimate operational trail. A trail that leads back to me, I said. Exactly. I leaned back slightly, absorbing that. So if someone audits this, they see you as an active participant, he finished. There it was. Not just a mistake. A design. What about the fund under my name? I asked. Harris clicked into another file. This is where it gets more interesting, he said. The fund acts as a holding buffer. Money moves into it, sits briefly, then gets redirected into other investments. Do I have access to it? He shook his head. No. Access is controlled through a separate authorization chain. Lucas. Or someone operating on his behalf, he said. I stared at the screen again, trying to reconcile something that felt impossible. My name is on it, but I can't touch it. That's the point, Harris said calmly. Ownership without control. I let out a slow breath. And if something goes wrong, then the person listed as the owner becomes the first point of accountability. Of course, it wasn't just about hiding money. It was about placing liability somewhere else. Can we prove I didn't control it? I asked. Harris nodded. We can build a strong argument. Access logs, authorization paths, communication records. It all helps. But he didn't hesitate. But it gets stronger if we can show who did control it. I glanced at Evan. That's what we're working on. Harris gave a small nod. Then you're moving in the right direction. There was a brief pause before he added, There's something else you should know. I felt my shoulders tense again. What? These kinds of structures don't operate in isolation, he said. They rely on people. Assistants, analysts, internal staff. Someone had to execute these transactions. Meaning someone else knows, I said. Yes, he replied. And if they're still in the system, they're either complicit or nervous. That word lingered. Nervous. Someone might talk, I said. Harris didn't smile, but there was a subtle shift in his expression. Someone already has. I looked at Evan immediately. He nodded once. Agent Cole mentioned it this morning. A former employee. I said connecting it. Kevin Doyle. Evan confirmed. I felt something shift again. Not relief, not yet, but movement. What does he know? I asked. Enough to request protection, Evan said. Which usually means enough to matter. That made sense. People didn't ask for protection over small details. When do we talk to him? Evan glanced at his watch. Soon, but there are conditions. Of course there are. He won't speak without legal assurance, Evan said, and he wants confirmation that what he provides won't be used against him. Can we give him that Agent Cole can? He replied. Within limits. I nodded slowly. Everything about this was controlled, structured, negotiated, just like Lucas liked it. Only now the structure wasn't his anymore. Set it up, I said. Evan studied me for a second, then nodded. I will. The meeting with Kevin was scheduled for the next afternoon. I didn't sleep much that night. Not from fear, at least not entirely, but from the constant replay of everything I had missed. The small moments, the overlooked details, the things that didn't feel right but weren't clear enough to question at the time. By morning I was exhausted, but clear. This wasn't about what I should have seen. It was about what I could prove now. When I arrived at the federal building, Agent Cole was already waiting. He didn't waste time on formalities. Kevin's in the room, he said. He's agreed to speak under limited immunity. Limited, I repeated. He talks truthfully. He's protected for what he discloses, Cole said. He holds back that protection disappears. Fair. We walked down a narrow hallway, the kind that makes everything feel quieter than it actually is. Before we reached the door, Cole stopped. "One more thing," he said. I looked at him. He claims he has more than just documents. My pulse picked up slightly. What else? Cole held my gaze for a second before answering. He has a recording. I felt that word settle differently than everything else. Documents could be argued, interpreted, challenged. But a recording? That was something else entirely. Cole opened the door. Inside, Kevin Doyle sat at a table, hands clasped, eyes already on me. "You're Aurora," he said. I nodded. He exhaled once, like he'd been holding that breath for a while. "Then you should hear this," he said, reaching into his jacket. And for the first time since this began, I felt like the truth wasn't just something we were building toward. It was something about to be heard. Tom. Kevin didn't rush. That was the first thing I noticed. He didn't act like someone desperate to get something off his chest. He moved like someone who had spent a long time deciding whether to speak and had only recently accepted that silence wasn't an option anymore. He placed a small digital recorder on the table between us. Not dramatic, not theatrical, just deliberate. Agent Cole remained standing near the wall, arms loosely crossed, watching. Evan sat beside me, his posture still but attentive. Kevin looked at me once more before pressing play. "This was about 3 weeks before your divorce was finalized," he said. The recording began with background noise, papers shifting, a door closing, then a voice I recognized immediately. Lucas. Calm. Controlled. The same tone he used in every room where he believed he held authority. "You're overcomplicating this," he said. There was a second voice, Kevin slightly younger, more uncertain. "I just want to make sure everything lines up legally." "It will," Lucas replied. "That's the whole point of the structure." A pause. Then Kevin again. "And Aurora. Her name's on several of the authorizations." My chest tightened, but I didn't look away. Lucas didn't hesitate. "That's intentional." The room felt smaller. Intentional how Kevin asked in the recording. Another pause. Then, if anything gets flagged later, Lucas said it needs to point somewhere neutral. Neutral. I felt something inside me shift. Not shock, not exactly, but confirmation. Kevin didn't speak for a moment in the recording. Then, "She doesn't know about this." "No," Lucas said. "And she doesn't need to." My hands stayed still in my lap, but I could feel the tension building under the surface. Kevin's voice again, quieter now. "That's a risk." "It's a calculated one," Lucas replied. "She signed the documents. The system won't question it unless someone forces it to." I closed my eyes for half a second. Signed the documents. Not because I agreed, because he had made sure it looked that way. The recording continued. "And the transfers?" Kevin asked. "Layered," Lucas said. "We move them out in phases, bring them back clean. Ryan handles the offshore side." Ryan. There it was again. Not implied, stated. Kevin exhaled audibly, and if she finds out, a longer pause this time. Then Lucas spoke quieter but sharper. "She won't. And if she does, it'll be too late to matter." The recording clicked off. No dramatic ending. No raised voices. Just certainty. Kevin reached forward and turned the device over in his hands like he wasn't quite ready to look up yet. "That's not the only one," he said. No one spoke immediately. I didn't trust my voice yet, not because I was overwhelmed, but because I wanted to be precise. When I finally did speak, it came out steadier than I expected. You kept this. Kevin nodded once. I started recording meetings when things stopped adding up. Why now? Evan asked. Kevin looked up, then his eyes moving between us before settling on me. Because it didn't stop, he said. They're still doing it. That matched what we had seen earlier, the recent activity. Why didn't you come forward sooner? I asked. He didn't flinch at the question. Because at first I thought it was just aggressive accounting, he said. Then I thought maybe I misunderstood. And now I know exactly what it is. His voice wasn't defensive. Just resolved. Agent Cole stepped forward slightly. Kevin has provided additional documents, he said. Internal communications, authorization logs. The recording is the most direct piece. Direct enough, I asked. Cole met my gaze. Direct enough to change how this case is handled. That mattered. Not emotionally, legally. Evan leaned in slightly. This establishes intent, he said quietly. Not just structure, intent. I nodded slowly. Intent. The one thing Agent Cole had said they needed to determine. Kevin shifted in his seat. There's something else, he added. I looked at him. What? They've been trying to clean it up, he said. Moving funds again. Adjusting records. We saw recent activity, I said. He nodded. It's not just that. They're isolating certain accounts. My stomach tightened. Which accounts? Kevin hesitated, not out of uncertainty, but caution. Yours, he said. The word landed differently than everything else. Not abstract, not theoretical. Yours. What does that mean? I asked. It means they're trying to separate anything tied to your name from the rest of the structure, he said. If this collapses, they want a clean break. A clean break. So I become the contained issue, I said. Kevin didn't respond. He didn't need to. Evan exhaled slowly. They're preparing for exposure, he said. Agent Cole nodded once. And that changes our timeline. How? I asked. It means we move sooner, he said. Before they finish restructuring. I leaned back slightly, letting all of it settle into place. 2 years ago, I had walked out of a room believing everything was over. Now I was sitting in another room listening to the moment it had all been decided without me. But something was different now. Back then, I had been reacting. Now, I was part of the response. Kevin slid a folder across the table toward Agent Cole. Everything I have is in there, he said. Emails, drafts, internal notes. Cole took it without looking inside. We'll review it, he said. Kevin nodded once, then leaned back, the tension in his shoulders finally easing just a fraction. Evan turned to me. Aurora, he said quietly. This is the turning point. I knew what he meant, not because it felt dramatic, but because it felt irreversible. Lucas hadn't just been careful. He had been certain that no one would question it, certain that I wouldn't understand it, certain that even if I did, it wouldn't matter. I looked at the recorder still sitting on the table, then at the folder now in Agent Cole's hands, then back at Kevin. You said there's more than one recording, I said. He nodded. Does any of it involve me directly? A brief pause. Then, yes. The room went still again. What does he say? I asked. Kevin hesitated, not because he didn't want to answer, but because he understood the weight of it. He talks about what to do if you refuse to cooperate, he said. Something in my chest tightened. Not fear exactly, but recognition. Play that one next, I said. Kevin looked at Agent Cole. Cole gave a small nod. Kevin reached for the recorder again, and this time I was ready for whatever came next. Kevin didn't press play immediately this time. He adjusted the recorder slightly, like he was giving me a moment not to prepare emotionally, but to understand what I was about to hear. I appreciated that, because I wasn't walking into this blind anymore. Before I play it, he said, "You should know. This one's more direct." I nodded once. That's fine. It wasn't fine, but I didn't need it to be. Kevin pressed play. This recording started cleaner, no background noise, no movement. Just voices, Lucas again, and someone else. "Let's be clear," Lucas said, his tone lower this time. Not the polished version he used in public, but something more precise, more controlled. "If Aurora asks questions, you redirect." The second voice responded. "And if she doesn't accept the explanation?" A brief pause. "Then we offer resolution," Lucas said. Resolution! The word landed heavier now after everything I had already heard. "And if she refuses that," the other voice asked. Lucas didn't hesitate. "Then she becomes the issue." I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just listened. "What does that mean?" The second voice pressed. "It means the structure holds," Lucas replied. "Her name is on the authorizations. The ownership trail leads to her. If this ever surfaces, she answers for it first." My fingers tightened slightly against my palm. Not in shock, in recognition. He had already decided where I stood in all of this. And legally, the second voice asked. "We stay within plausible deniability," Lucas said. "No direct signatures from me. No instructions that tie back cleanly. Everything routes through standard channels." Standard channels. That phrase again, something made to sound normal, routine, unremarkable, and the offer Lucas exhaled quietly. "She'll take it." A pause. "She always chooses stability." The recording ended there. No raised voices. No urgency. Just certainty. Kevin set the recorder down again, slower this time. No one spoke immediately. I didn't need a second to process it. I had already lived it. He wasn't guessing who I was. He was relying on it. The version of me that signed documents without asking enough questions. The version that avoided conflict. The version that believed walking away quietly was the same as being free. That version had made sense to him. It had been predictable. Safe. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. "Well," I said, my voice calm in a way that surprised even me, "that answers that." Evan glanced at me. "You okay?" "I'm clear," I said. And I was, more than I had been at any point since this started, because now there was no interpretation left, no ambiguity, no space for Lucas to reframe anything. Agent Cole stepped forward, picking up the recorder. "This changes the structure of the case," he said. "How I asked." "Intent is no longer inferred," he replied. "It's documented." Evan nodded slightly. "And the attempt to redirect liability is explicit." Which means, Evan said, turning to me, that any settlement offer he makes now isn't just strategic, it's defensive. That matched what I had felt at the cafe. The shift. The urgency beneath his control. "He contacted me earlier," I said. "Offered to adjust imbalances." Agent Cole's expression didn't change, but I saw the recognition in his eyes. "Did you respond?" "No." "Good," he said. "Because if he tries again, we want that documented." "Why?" "Because it establishes a pattern," he said. "Control manipulation and now containment." Containment. That was exactly what it had felt like. I looked down at my hands for a moment, then back up. He thinks I'll take the offer, I said. Evan tilted his head slightly. Will you? The question wasn't rhetorical. It wasn't obvious either, not in the way people like to pretend these decisions are simple, because part of me understood exactly what Lucas was offering: an exit. Quiet resolution. No investigation. No exposure. No drawn-out process that would drag my name through something I never chose to be part of. Stability. Just like he said. I thought about that version of myself again, the one who signed the papers, the one who let things go because fighting felt harder than leaving. Then I thought about the version of me sitting here now, looking at evidence, understanding patterns, choosing not to look away. I don't want stability if it's built on something that can be used against me later, I said finally. Evan didn't smile, but something in his expression settled. That's the right answer, he said. Agent Cole nodded once. Then we move forward. Forward didn't mean fast. It meant deliberate, structured, documented, just like everything Lucas had built. Only now the system wasn't protecting him. It was being used to expose him. What happens next? I asked. Cole glanced at the folder Kevin had provided, then back at me. We finalize the timeline, he said. Secure the remaining records and prepare for formal proceedings. Court. Most likely, he said. I nodded slowly. That didn't scare me the way it once would have, not because it was easy, but because it was clear. Kevin shifted slightly in his seat. There's one more thing, he said. I looked at him. What? He hesitated, then said, Lucas has been trying to move assets out faster over the past few days. We know, Evan said. Kevin shook his head. No, you don't understand. He's not just moving them. A small pause. He's consolidating. My chest tightened slightly. For what? Kevin met my eyes. For a final transfer. The room went quiet again, but not with uncertainty this time. With timing. Agent Cole stepped toward the door. Then we don't wait, he said. I stood up, my pulse steady, my thoughts sharper than they had ever been. 2 years ago, everything had happened around me. Now, for the first time, I was exactly where I needed to be before the next move happened. The hearing room didn't look the way I expected. No dramatic tension, no raised voices, just quiet structure, wood paper, measured movement. The kind of place where decisions didn't need volume to carry weight. I sat beside Evan, hands folded loosely in front of me. Across the room, Lucas looked exactly the same as he always had. Composed, controlled, but not entirely untouched. There was something different in the way he held still, not confidence, not calm. Something closer to calculation under pressure. For the first time, he wasn't setting the terms. The proceedings moved carefully, not rushed, not theatrical. Agent Cole presented the timeline, first transactions, account movements, corporate structures. Each piece placed deliberately building something that didn't need explanation because it was already coherent. Then came the technical layer. Metadata from the digital signatures. IP address logs tied to Bennett Holdings. Authorization records showing access patterns that didn't align with my activity. Nothing was exaggerated. That was the strength of it. When Kevin's testimony came, the room shifted slightly, not in energy, but in focus. He didn't overstate anything. He didn't need to. He described the system the way someone describes a process they've seen repeatedly. Not dramatic, just consistent. Then the recordings were introduced. The first one played without interruption. Lucas's voice clear, precise, explaining how my name was meant to absorb scrutiny. I didn't look at him while it played. I didn't need to. The second recording followed. If Aurora asks questions, you redirect. If she refuses, she becomes the issue. This time I did glance up. Not at the judge. At Lucas. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking straight ahead, expression steady, but there was a tension there now. Not fear, not yet, but something closer to recognition, the kind that comes when a plan stops being theoretical, when it's no longer protected by silence. Evan leaned slightly toward me. "This is where it shifts," he said quietly. I already felt it, because everything Lucas had relied on ambiguity, control, perception was being replaced with something else. Documentation, clarity, sequence. When it was his turn to respond, Lucas didn't deny everything. That would have been too obvious. Instead, he reframed. "These structures are standard in international finance," he said. "My intention was always to manage risk and protect assets." Protect. There was that word again. Used differently now. The judge didn't interrupt. Lucas continued carefully selecting each word. "If Aurora's name appears in these records, it's because she was part of the financial framework during our marriage." Framework. Not control, not authority, just proximity. Evan stood when it was his turn, not raising his voice, not changing tone. "Intent matters," he said. "And we have direct evidence of intent." He referenced the recordings, the metadata, the access logs, not as accusations, as facts. "The question isn't whether Ms. Flores' name appears in the structure," Evan continued. "It's whether she knowingly participated in it." A pause. Nothing presented here supports that conclusion. The room stayed quiet, not waiting, settling. When the decision came, it wasn't dramatic. It didn't need to be. The findings acknowledged fraudulent misrepresentation, unauthorized use of digital credentials, and deliberate structuring to obscure financial movement. Lucas wasn't led out of the room. That wasn't how this worked. But the shift was unmistakable. Control had moved. Not to me. Away from him. And that was enough. Outside the building, the air felt different. Not lighter exactly, just clearer. Evan walked beside me in silence for a moment before speaking. "You handled that well," he said. "I didn't do anything," I replied. "You did," he said. "You stayed in it." I thought about that for a second. 2 years ago I had left. Signed papers, closed doors, chosen distance over confrontation. This time I stayed, and that changed the outcome. "Do I get the money back?" I asked after a moment. Evan didn't answer immediately. "Not all of it," he said. "Some will be recovered, some won't." I nodded. That felt expected. Because this was never really about the number. It was about what the number represented. Control. Silence. A version of the story where I never questioned anything. That version didn't exist anymore. My phone buzzed once in my bag. I didn't check it. I didn't need to. There was nothing left for Lucas to say that could change anything now. I stopped at the edge of the sidewalk looking out at the street. For a moment I thought about everything that had led here. The signatures I didn't question. The access I didn't notice disappearing. The quiet decisions made around me. And then I thought about what came next. Not revenge. Not even closure in the way people usually describe it. Just something simpler. Boundaries. Clear ones. Permanent ones. "I'm not going to respond if he reaches out again," I said. Evan nodded. "You don't have to." That was the difference. Before I thought silence meant losing something. Now I understood it could mean choosing something. I took a breath, steady and even. For the first time in a long time, there was no part of me waiting for the situation to shift again. It already had, and this time it stayed that way. The hardest part about being manipulated isn't what someone takes from you. It's how long it takes to realize you were part of a structure designed to control the outcome. For a long time, I thought walking away was enough. That distance alone would protect me. But what I learned is that boundaries aren't just about leaving, they're about understanding where your responsibility ends and someone else's begins. If you've ever been in a situation where things didn't quite add up, where you felt something was off but couldn't prove it yet, pay attention to that instinct. Not everything reveals itself immediately, but patterns always exist if you look closely enough. And choosing not to engage anymore doesn't mean you're weak. It means you've decided what no longer has access to you. If any part of this story felt familiar, you're not alone. Share your thoughts, your experience, or even just where you're listening from. And if you want more stories like this, you can stay with the channel. This is a fictional story created for entertainment, education, and reflection.